Great. Well, we're going to start out this afternoon with historical background on the art form hip-hop. And we'll start with Israel.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Mike. How's he doing?
1, 2. All right. I think it's interesting.
Bring him up. Bring him up.
Yeah. 1, 2. All right. It's interesting that we're talking about social change. You know, here we are in 2012, and we're talking about social change using hip-hop as a tool. And, you know, what I think is somewhat ironic today is that, you know, we look at positive hip-hop almost as an alternative, you know, form of the genre. And as somebody that grew up in the Bronx during the 70s and 80s, specifically in the Soundview area, I know for a fact that hip-hop was created by youth in the inner city that were underprivileged socially, economically, and really at the bottom rung in regards to most people's perception about success. And these kids, for the most part, minority African-American youth, Caribbean youth, Hispanic youth, created a culture that ultimately changed the face of the planet Earth. And here we are, you know, almost 40 years, 35 years later, and we're talking about using hip-hop as a positive tool. I mean, hip-hop, you know, from its inception was in many ways a salvation of inner city youth. It provided a voice for the voiceless and really an alternative to all of the urban blight that young minority children were growing up with in the inner city, specifically in New York City, its birthplace. So it's kind of interesting to just explore this today, you know, and really in many ways I think the answer is really knowing your history and going back to what hip-hop was and understanding why it even existed in the first place before it got so commercialized and in many ways poisoned by crime culture, because ultimately it was an alternative to crime. Today, in so many young people's minds, you know, somehow it's connected and it's an extension of crime, and it gives people the ability in some ways to have a forum to brag about crime, and I think that's quite sad. But anyway, that's my perspective, as not as a historian of hip-hop, but really as a child of hip-hop. Any thoughts, Jared?
I totally agree with what you're saying. Hip-hop, as for me, growing up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, being born in Washington, D.C., and having parents, one who was a Somali that was living in America, going to school, and Caribbean and African-American mother, and just growing up in South Florida around a variety of different people. For me, hip-hop has always been something that's kind of like in jazz. Starts off in New Orleans and it moves around the country. So I encountered hip-hop. She caught my eye when I was in my early teens. You know, after my mom allowed me to listen to Run DMC when I was like 9. I remember I went to go see this movie called Tougher Than Leather. Remember that? And I know I was not of age to be in that movie theater, because if you've ever seen that movie, it's a lot of nudity and cussing. But I just remember it's called Tougher Than Leather, Run DMC. Beastie Boys, Rick Rubin, all those people are in there, like, you know, some of the major proponents of the beginning of the business of the music. And they're doing this movie, and I see it, and I go, oh my goodness, that's crazy. Because I'm a little kid, you know, wow. But there's so many things that I'd already seen. And so then I think I started realizing that that was what culture was in my mind. Not the totality of culture, but just that, like, oh, like, wow, that's, you know, that's not just some silly thing to do. That's like part of everything around me. And then I started looking for it. Like, once you start liking poetry or books, you start looking, once you get that bug, you start looking for it. And then I'm like, it's everywhere. And today, being a 35-year-old male, living in America, it's just so crazy to know the thing that I was born into and was already here is like the thing that makes everybody's head bop all over the world. I think I watched a documentary where paraphrasing Erykah Badu, hip hop rules the world. It runs the world. You know, and I think that's great. I wish definitely